First, how you like the picture of the pillow up there, huh? Creepy. Um, some of you may have already read this before. I know it's a classic, and many students read it in high school. I did, and I remember very distinctly the impression it made on me. I had no idea what was coming at the end of the story, and I had to do a double take. Maybe you did too the first time you read it, and if this is your first time, maybe the double take was just before you decided to view this. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about Southern Gothic with this story. This isn't the only story we're touching on that deals with Southern Gothic, the Southern Gothic tradition, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And you can, why whole books and books and books have been written on the subject of the Southern Gothic tradition or genre, subgenre, if you will. And it basically is related to the notion that it's basically a tradition in Southern literature, Southern storytelling that deals with stories that have an ironic ending. They frequently deal with either the supernatural or perceptions about the supernatural, as I think I wrote about in the notes. Doesn't always turn out to be supernatural, but there's at least some vague hint of the supernatural. Oftentimes, many people don't write about this, but the social structure and the way individual characters are presented are distinct within this genre because social structure and how it shapes characterization frequently is at play in some of these if you look very carefully at them. But the big thing, in my view anyway, that distinguishes the Southern Gothic tradition or Southern Gothic horror or whatever you want to call it, is the fact that it draws upon what, in almost every case, is some sort of buried past. And it could be, a situation like this one where you have Emily Grierson and there is some unresolved something that happened long, long ago after the war. Of course, her family lost its property and but held on desperately to its social standing, even though the financial means to do so had deteriorated. Certainly for her, the war and its aftermath and the sort of the skeletons buried, no pun intended, buried in terms of family scandal or family history there. All of that very, very important. The notion of hanging on, for whites anyway, to hang on to the family property, the family legacy, hanging on to, you see a dilapidated antebellum home there down in the bottom of this slide, trying desperately to hang on like Gone with the Wind to Terra, and to rebuild it and do what you have to and to adapt, but still to hang on to that tradition. But the notion that there's always something deep, dark, and buried in a person or a family's past that continues to haunt or reemerge or come back to the surface, and that is a really important element to it. It's not just like sort of the spooky stories of other regions. It's got something wound up in social structure and the past and a very heavy use of irony. If I had to point out sort of three big things, there are other things, but three big things, and you see all of them at play here. This is just textbook case for Southern Gothic. A Rose for Emily is just a classic in that respect. Faulkner is our writer here. And of course, we've got the Grierson family and Emily, who grew up post Civil War, and her daddy uh, uh, is someone who is sort of honorifically more than anything else referred to by his military title, and it's a family that once was probably quite prominent and had a lot of money, but after the war, all that changes, of course, and yet the social structure. This is a funny thing. The finances, the money underpinning the social structure is now gone. But the social structure, the people, the relationships, if you want to put it down on this level, the pecking order of a society is still in place because there's nothing else to take its place yet. Okay, and so you find that some of the most respected and prominent and oldest families in town used to be respected and prominent because they had a lot of money. Now they don't have any money, just like everybody else, but they still have that sense of honor and dignity and prominence and believe in their heart, and many others do too, by the way. This is not just arrogance on their part. Believe in their heart that they're somehow a breed above everyone else. and that they are the natural leaders. The aristocracy that existed pre-war doesn't just go away once the financial ability to support that aristocracy goes away. The money is gone, and what you end up with is a kind of, you know, poor aristocracy that does not have the means to support itself and continue. That's the thing that Faulkner's so interested in writing about. You see it in a lot of his stories. Everything that goes on in the in Yoknapatawpha County in Mississippi, where this fictional place where he's writing about, it's really all about, you know, a sort of leftover, hollowed out social class structure that really should go the way of, you know, the Middle Ages. But there's nothing to take its place yet, you see? So they're sort of between eras. It's not the Old South, but it's not the New South yet either. Something is coming, something will change that. Industrialization, you know, modernization, education, all of those things will come and take its place. But for a period of time, there's a generation or two that's kind of lost and suspended in animation there. They don't know what to do with their lives because the way they were raised to believe in themselves or to view themselves isn't reality anymore. And so Faulkner's character, we could go on for this. Dr. Bridges in our department does a far better job dealing with Faulkner than I ever could. But, you know, this is classic Faulkner stuff here with the Grierson family. Why is it still so respected? Well, because there really wasn't another social structure, social class, or to take its place. The old system didn't have something to take its place. Homer Barron, and of course you get to the end. Spoiler alert. Well, it's not a spoiler alert. If you've read it, it wouldn't be a spoiler. We don't know exactly what transpires, but Emily buys some poison, and it could be that Mr. Barron, coming from outside of the South, having a different set of traditions and a different set of values, and being from a different kind of class of individual, doesn't necessarily adhere to the same view of life or social conventions or courtship conventions that someone like Emily Grierson adhered to. Therefore, Mr. Barron may very well have, shall we say, taken the relationship to a physical level that he was not prepared to make a commitment based on, right? Very nice way of saying that he may have simply saw this as a dalliance, but certainly Emily didn't. Emily said, oh no, you know, where I come from, you know, once you go a certain way down the path, you're going forever. Um, and I'm going to get this man to marry me whether it kills him. And certainly it seems as though she did. You're given a lot of hints, and so that's kind of part of the fun of the story is that the hints of, hey, there's a bad smell, and maybe it's rats or something. Now we know, don't we? But of course, the creepiest part, naturally, is that, you know, there's a pillow with an indentation and a gray hair. So this is not something that she just kind of killed him, locked him in the room, and never went back. Oh no. She went back frequently, at least, and certainly somewhat recently. And there's every reason to believe that she just, at the end of each day, she turned out the light and said, "Good night, honey." Just weird and strange. Now, what I want to do is I want to invite you to, among many other things you can do with this story. Oh my goodness, you can just write about it forever. But, and lots of different kinds of facets. There's one facet in particular that I want to ask you to think about here, and that is considering Homer Barron and this failed courtship as kind of metaphorical. Now, I don't want to go way too far out on a limb here, but I do want to kind of stimulate you to think about this just a little bit. Here's Emily, and, you know, marriage is an institution. It's a thing that your social class and culture dictate the norms for it. She had certain expectations, and that was not going to happen, right? Homer was not going to marry her. She expected that he would, and he did not want to. And she had it all playing out in her mind the way it's supposed to for a young woman of her social standing in a town like the one she's growing up in, and she's just not going to be jilted. How dare he jilt me, especially a Yankee, for heaven's sakes, right? It's bad enough she had a relationship with a Yankee, but she'll be darned if he's going to flout social convention and these small town values and norms that she's got a reputation to look up to, or to live up to. But beyond that, you can look at Homer as being kind of a metaphor of people who are married to a dead system. Okay? All right, now that may be going out on the limb a little bit much, but have some fun with the story. That's what we're reading it for in part. In other words, she's still married to the old way of doing things, the old way of expect. I shouldn't have to pay my property taxes. My daddy took care of that. My daddy was a prominent. We've been dead for years, right? We don't live like that anymore, lady. But she's old, and that's the way she did things. And there are a handful of people in town who still treat her the way she is used to being treated, whether she deserves it or not. That's the way they treat her. But others say, "Who is this crazy old lady?" Um, and so she's still wedded to the past. She's still wedded to a past that's dead. Okay? And so Homer is kind of, except for the fact that Homer is a Yankee, in some ways, there's a sort of social corpse that she's still kind of hanging out with, and that's her view of the South and races and classes and those kinds of things. So it's just kind of just trying to kind of stimulate you to kind of think a little bit further here. It's more than just a story with a creepy ending. Faulkner has something to say about Southern class, Southern culture, the changes, the radical changes that are going on, and the generation that kind of got caught between the old system and the new system that was coming. And what do we do with them? What do they do with themselves? So these are some interesting questions. Think about that when we get to our discussion and see what you have to say about it.